Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen, your host. For more than 13 years, I've been handcrafting these sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, I love spotlighting diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. I invite you to listen up and change the way you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Alrighty then, let's dive in. This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where you will learn how to think and behave better. We are summarizing the science of mental immunity with my guest, Dr. Andy Norman. Dr. Andy Norman is the award-winning author of Mental Immunity, Infectious Ideas, Mind Parasites, and the Search for a Better Way to Think. His work has appeared in Scientific American, Psychology Today, Psychiatric Times, Skeptic, Free Inquiry, and The Humanist. Andy has appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience, NPR, and the BBC's Naked Scientist. His research illuminates the evolutionary origins of human reasoning, the norms that make dialogue fruitful, and the working of the mind's immune system, which we now know is a thing. Andy champions the emerging science of mental immunity as the antidote to disinformation, propaganda, hate, and division. He is the founder of the Cognitive Immunology Research Collaborative, also known as CIRCE, which is a global think tank leading the effort to inoculate humanity against cognitive contagion. And the time is now, Andy.
Yeah. Well, some of my friends tell me I should have been doing this 20 years ago. But
yeah. Well, maybe we'd be in a different position. But you know what? Better to lead now, than never.
That's right.
You and I were talking before we started this interview about a conversation that you and I had a couple of years ago when this book was just an idea.
Yeah.
And look how far you've come and how far we've come, in our collaboration.
I'm really excited about working together with you, Lisa. I've got very high hopes for what we can accomplish together. There's such a crying need for this right now. And I think you can help us get the word out and help us explain it to people.
I am eager to do so because since we began even, the world has gone to hell in a handbasket.
In very significant ways, yes. So a lot of people are wondering, why has the world gone crazy? Why is it that we can't think rationally and problem solve like we used to? I think the deep story here is that information technology tools and the internet have made it really easy to create viral content that spreads in epidemiological fashion by infection. And it's infecting minds all over the world in ways that are causing dysfunction. Bodily immune systems and infectious microbes have been in arms races for millions of years. And every once in a while, the infectious microbes get the upper hand. Yeah. And we have to help our body's immune system learn how to cope. I think that the same thing's been going on with our minds. Our minds have been trying to adapt to environments full of infectious information for thousands and thousands of years. And right now, the infectious information has the upper hand because the internet.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do to adapt?
Well, it also makes me think from a neuroscientific perspective, what goes on in our brain when we get so overstimulated with this information, right? Cortisol levels rise in the body, which then take us out of reason, accountability, and logic, right? Because it disconnects us from the prefrontal cortex. And we're no longer rational humans.
And you've just made a point that underscores the reality of mental immune systems in the same way that our body's immune system can freak out and create lots of cortisol, and it's often called inflammation.
Yeah.
Our mind's immune systems can freak out and generate lots of stress and dysfunction. That's basically the mind's immune system overreacting to all of the informational stressors.
Which place us in an anxious state, which lowers our physical immunity and our mental immunity, right? When we're in that fear state, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? The other shoe is going to drop. I don't know where, but I can guarantee it,
Well, and here's a finding that supports that. It turns out that when people are stressed and anxious and despairing, they're more susceptible, for example, to conspiracy theories.
Yes.
So our susceptibility to bad ideas, false ideas, dysfunctional ideas, that can go to hell in a handbasket under the wrong conditions. And right now, just in the last 20 years, we've created a world that's so wholly different from the one we evolved in. And we don't have the cognitive antibodies for some of these conspiracy theories and some of the propaganda that's out there. We need to start building those antibodies fast, or things will continue to go haywire.
So when we talk about cognitive immunology and the tools required to help us fortify our mental immunity, let's talk a little bit about the skills necessary.
So it turns out that the mind acquires resistance to infectious information in pretty much the same way the body acquires resistance to infectious microbes by developing and manufacturing antibodies. So the way we experience cognitive antibodies we experience them as doubts. So when information comes along and it doesn't fit, or there's something problematic about it, doubts are likely to pop up in your mind. That's your mind's immune system trying to warn you to be careful with this information. Maybe don't rely on it over much. We need to learn to listen to those doubts so that problematic information doesn't take over our minds and really warp our worldviews.
Let's talk a little bit about doubt, healthy skepticism, and fear-based operation, because they are different things.
Exactly. So a certain amount of doubt is healthy, but you can have too much doubt for your own good. You can become so cynical, so lacking in trust, suspicious, that your mind's immune system overreacts to everything.
For example, all the media is telling lies. You can't trust politicians or government.
Perfect.
Or this group or that group, they're all bad. They're all rotten.
Those are beautiful examples, Lisa. And I mean, each of them represents an overgeneralization, right? There's lots of reasons to be unhappy with big pharma. There's lots of reasons to be unhappy with politicians, it's with big media, right? The mainstream media. But these sweeping generalizations, like the mainstream media is all corrupt, that's just too general to be a useful idea. That idea can itself unhinge your mind by making you unduly suspicious, and it can undermine your trust.
So take us through a process of questioning and evaluating some of these grandiose statements.
So ideally, if I'm talking to somebody who says, the mainstream media is all corrupt, ideally, what I want to do is try to slow down the conversation, become a better listener, and give them an opportunity to hear themselves think. So instead of trying to jump in and refute them or argue that the mainstream media is just fine, because I'm not going to get anywhere with that, I just, that's interesting. Tell me more about this view of yours that the mainstream media is corrupt. Do you mean it's like this monolithic thing where everything's coordinated? Because wow, that would be a hard thing to pull off.
That would be pretty amazing, huh?
Right? But you can see how my use of questions there can plant the seeds of doubt. And that here we're talking about doubts that undermine a kind of suspicion that's indiscriminate. Right? I mean, there is no single coordinated mainstream media. There are literally tens of thousands of different people like yourself who are working to get good information out.
Right.
And most of them mean well. Most of them do their homework. Most of them are trying to help us. And yeah, there's stories out there that we need to be suspicious of. But to throw them all into the chuck it basket, that's just not a helpful way to think.
And it leaves us alone, except for the tribe that we attach to in this conspiracy thinking world.
Exactly. In fact, I think as people study conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, What they find is that, they gradually grow more and more suspicious and cynical, and they start losing their connections and their trust with many of the people that make their life rich and socially rich. And then they rely more and more on the people who inhabit the same conspiratorial rabbit holes that they meet online. And that's a trap. You can get trapped in an utterly false and misleading and dysfunctional worldview if you don't seek out many sources of information, build trust with others.
Yeah.
So you really got to be careful about these, and the conspiracy theories can be really seductive, right? It's like you're in on a big secret and you can see past the veil of illusion that nobody else can see past.
It's dangerous. I mean, we saw how dangerous it can be. We continue to see how dangerous it can be, both in the United States and abroad.
It's threatening democracies now all over the world. And of course, it's not just that conspiracy theories spread willy-nilly because they happen by accident to be seductive. We've also got bad actors learning how to weaponize information to hijack our minds. Scholars call this disinformation as opposed to misinformation, which can be wrong accidentally.
Well, you say it enough times and it becomes the reality of one's experience, right? I mean, this is the propaganda. This is how it's done. No. These are the alternative facts. This is how it really is.
And that's a well-known mind hacking technique, which is just repeat things. It turns out our minds, if they hear things frequently, they tend to assume that they're more true than things we hear infrequently. So there's a little mental shortcut that's evolved into our minds that bad actors can exploit. So when Donald Trump goes on the air and says the election was rigged, and he says it again and again and again. In fact, he started saying it months before the election ever happened, which shows you how much credibility it has. But he knew, because he's an expert mind hacker, that if he repeats it enough, it'll come to feel true.
Yeah.
And some people will be taken in by that. And I think we need to work together to help people who might otherwise be vulnerable or susceptible to this stuff, because nobody whose mind has been hacked by another is truly free.
Isn't that the truth? That is an irrefutable piece of fact right there. But let's talk about what Donald Trump said about the election being rigged, doing so before the election. He said, if I win, it's a clean election. If I lose, it's a rigged election. And when we follow reason, logic, and accountability, that makes no sense.
Right. That should have disqualified his voice in the minds of every well-thinking American, even before the election came along. I mean, it was an egregious use of disinformation to hack people's ability to think clearly. And I think one thing we all need to come to grips with is how vulnerable all of us are in these weird information environments that don't yet have, in many cases, the rules of the road. It's kind of like the Wild West of
isn't it, though? Yeah. It is amazing. We're going to need to take a break, and I just want to qualify the way in which we're speaking. We are not actually talking about politics, right? Like, you and I don't care about political parties when we're talking about this. We're really talking about nefarious actors and acts that undermine, like you said, our freedom.
That's right. And I'd be just as much against progressive mind hacking as I am against conservative mind hacking. This should be a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue.
Well, and when we operate in this way, which goes to sort of a high moral compass, high character value, rationality, you end up with a society at a much higher performance level than what we have now.
More rational societies provide more well-being and more happiness for their members than ones that descend into unreason.
I think it was Lee McIntyre, who's one of the collaborators at CIRCE. He and I were talking about an experience that he had in Australia. He was there for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. And his observation about how well society runs there and the subjective well-being of the citizens of Australia, which go hand in hand. Now, we can all agree that Australia is a beautiful place. It's an isolated environment. It's got so many less citizens there to manage. So
Yes.
all of that does make sense, but it's a rational place. Everybody votes. Voting is compulsory.
There are many things Australia's getting right that we're not in
Yeah.
America, but I have talked to Australians that see various forms of outrageous irrationality spreading there as well. It's not that Australia has solved the problem. Lee, of course, is a wonderful friend, and I haven't yet to have the conversation with him. I'll have to learn.
Oh, yeah. You and Lee better get after it. I hope I didn't start something. But he was just gushing. And I've been there a couple of times myself. I could connect with everything that he said. And I don't think that there is a nirvana. There is no perfect place, except when we work on ourselves and create that experience, no matter what goes on out there in the world, right?
Yeah.
We have the power to do that.
Well, I mean, you can beat back irrationality for a while, or you can develop cognitive antibodies to lots of the worst sort of mind bugs out there. And then a new mind bug will evolve.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody will come up with one, and then the arms race. We're off and running again with the arms race.
Let's take a pause. We will come back and continue the conversation with Andy Norman. To find out more, go to andynorman.com. And also it's cognitiveimmunology.net for those who are curious and want to join me over there, because that's where all the goodies are related to what we're talking about. To connect with Andy out there on social media, please do so on Twitter at Dr. Andy No, and on Facebook, Andy Norman Author. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back. Just a second here. Before we take that pause, I want to mention the happiness of good hair days. If you're anything like me, you are so over winter hat head and yearning for a hair pick-me-up. Truth be told, these days I don't get to the salon often, and my work-from-home professional attire is pretty much athleisure wear and a low-key hairdo. But I do love having beauty shop quality hair at home. And that's why I'm going from shower to salon quality hair in just 5 minutes with Ouai's new hair gloss, which has instantly become a go-to part of my self-care routine because it quickly gives my tresses a fast shine boost. Don't you just love that instant gratification? Ouai's new hair gloss delivers immediate sparkle, helps treat damage, and enhances color that radiates fabulous hair, not to mention providing heat protection against styling tools. The beauty of Ouai's new hair gloss is that my hair goes from drab to dazzling after a 5-minute treatment made with hyaluronic acid and rice water. According to a recent user perception study, 85% of participants agreed that their hair looks shinier, healthier, and smoother after use. Ouai offers a complete hair care solution that promotes fuller looking, healthier feeling, and happier hair for everyone. Fine, medium, or thick hair, Ouai has got you covered. Treat yourself to great self-care and good hair days with Ouai's best-selling products like their leave-in conditioner, detox shampoo, travel destination-inspired fragrances, and hair oil. Give your hair a glow-up with Ouai. Go to theouai.com and use promo code HH for 15% off any product. That's theouai.com, promo code HH. Now let's take that pause. We'll be right back. Each day we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstance. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, seek support because good psychological health is vital in the achievement of a happy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial educational resources to boost emotional and social intelligence. Like what you hear on Harvesting Happiness? Sharing is caring. Pay it forward by spreading the word to your community and through social media. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes from wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. And we're back, continuing the conversation with my guest today, Dr. Andy Norman. We're talking about thinking and behaving better through the science of mental immunity. Let's get back to it. So, Andy, let's talk a little bit about the Mental Immunity Declaration.
Yeah. So at the same time, we're trying to convert what we know about the mind's immune system into practical tools anyone can use. We're actually busy trying to convince scientists that the mind really does have an immune system. And we've just finished an article that basically demonstrates that in every meaningful sense, the mind does have an evolved system for defending itself against problematic information. But the declaration is kind of an attempt to spread the word in the scientific community that there's this really fascinating new science that's going to help us adapt to the information age and this mis and disinformation problems that we have. And it's also a call to arms to begin integrating the insights of what we call cognitive immunology into educational systems, into policy, into journalistic practices. Because it turns out that journalists, teachers, policymakers, if they know a little bit about how the mind's immune system works, they can do a better job of equipping people to avoid mind hacking.
Yeah. Well, it's like when winter comes, we sort of boost our vitamin C intake, right? We're talking about something similar.
That's right.
That is intellectual.
Well, and I believe that some chemists and biochemists think that vitamin C can boost the body's immune system. Well, certain forms of information and certain lessons can boost your mind's immune system and make it more resilient. So,
like healthy skepticism, right? Healthy skepticism, asking powerful, open-ended questions.
Learning how to ask those questions,
yes.
When to ask them.
Learning to be quiet, listen more, say less. Things like this.
You've summed it up beautifully. I think would be right near the top of my
yeah, exactly.
my list. Yes.
Even though we're chatting away, you and I are both chatty Cathys about this subject. The reality of it is that when we're out in the world trying to do what we do, we're doing these things.
Yeah. I like to encourage people to recognize that if you find yourself using reasons to defeat somebody in argument, you're doing it wrong. Reasons are tools for gently guiding a collaborator's attention to a relevant consideration. And the exchange of reasons should be a hallowed space where minds meet together in common understanding, not where people pummel each other for this so that they can feel superior.
Which leads me to a really important point that I know you and I have talked about in the past, certainly with all of the collaborators on this project, we've talked about it. And that is, if you were to ask somebody who holds an opposing view, or perhaps a conspiratorial view, what they really want out of their lives and what matters to them, it will not be different than what we feel.
Yeah, I think almost everybody gives very similar answers to questions.
Yes.
And that means that if we explore the question of what really matters together in conversation, we often find that we have much more in common than we think, and that the disagreements we have are relatively inconsequential by comparison. In fact, philosophers have been saying for thousands of years, if we ask those fundamental questions and explore them together, it becomes much easier to resolve the little political or moral questions that pop up, because we have common ground we can build on. And we have understanding we can build on.
Is your leaf blower there? Or was there a plane overhead?
That is a leaf blower.
That is the leaf blower.
Yes.
We can just roll with it because, leaf blowing happens at leaf time of year. Leaves are not a bad thing. Okay, so going back to what we were talking about, actually the topic of the common thread or striving to work for the common goal, that somebody with a radically opposing view to our own at the end of the day, I just think it's really important to drive this home, doesn't want anything much different for their lives than we want for our own.
One of the things people used to kind of get, to sort of learn just from face-to-face conversations everywhere, is that before you start disagreeing, just try to understand the person. Spend 5 minutes more just getting clear about what the other person is saying. Postpone the moment where you jump down their throats and tell them all the ways they're wrong. And that can be both transformative. It can build trust.
Yes.
Right. And you need that trust to have healthy conversations. Just the other day, I was talking to a podcaster who begged me not to go near the Israel-Hamas story on his show.
Really?
And I said, why is that? He said, it's become so toxic. He said, it's a treacherous terrain. He says, these conversations on topics like this have become so treacherous. I don't want to go there. And unfortunately, too many people are feeling like conversations, they don't know how to keep conversations constructive. So they don't know how to have the difficult conversations or address some of these core philosophical questions that give our lives meaning.
We could do a whole show, probably a whole series on that, but we don't have time today. But that's a conversation that I am willing to have because you can have it with deep empathy
Yes.
and compassion and kindness and
So key.
a meta view that.
And the internet seems to be disrupting those core human virtues, those core human character traits. It somehow interferes with our expressing of that basic kindness, empathy, and trust. So we need to adapt, and we need to adapt fast because
Otherwise we'll just it will, the whole thing will implode, and then we won't have to worry about any of it. I mean, that's how imperative I think it is.
That's supposed to cheer me up, Lisa.
Well, I think it's a wake-up call to all of us. Like, even though we are thousands of miles away from many of these conflicts that are going on around the world, we're not separated from them. We're not disconnected from them. And even though it's not your mother, father, child, friend, whatnot, it's not our direct relatives that are being affected. We're affected because we're human.
Yeah. And my gosh, the tensions are running so high about this war in the Middle East. And it's hard to say anything that doesn't set somebody off. I think the number one thing we all need to learn, if we're going to make our world sane again, we need to resolve individually not to be triggerable.
Yes.
So what you're basically doing when you say, I'm not going to react to what you have to say, I'm going to listen and slowly, deliberately respond to what you say. So we need to combat our reactive natures if we're going to become good conversationalists again and get past this really difficult moment in human history. But we can do it. Human beings have done this before.
We can do it because we're smart. Humans are smart. They have the capacity for tremendous brain power and emotional and social intelligence. But we have to work at it, right? It's not like we're not born with it.
Exactly. It takes practice.
It takes practice.
Yeah. And having difficult conversations is an art form that you have to practice to get good at. But if we just avoid those conversations because we're worried about getting canceled or looking stupid in front of others, we miss out on all kinds of learning opportunities and all kind of bridge building opportunities.
When I was in graduate school, I had a professor that called it carefrontation. It's kind of a fuzzy, cozy way of introducing the topic of positive confrontation by calling it a carefrontation. But it's true that when you change the mindset.
I love that term, carefrontation. That connects. I gave a workshop last night where I shared a quote from the Scottish philosopher David Hume. He said that the truth springs from arguments among friends. And his point there was that if you really want to learn stuff and deepen your understanding of things, you actually have to get into the confrontation. You have to embrace conflict and the learning opportunities that are implicit in conflict. But the friendliness has to predominate, right? Yeah. The care has to predominate. So a good conversation is simultaneously challenging, but also affirming. And how do you do those simultaneously without veering off into enmity on the one hand, or just banality and, how's the weather there, right?
And diminishment of the other, right? The finger pointing of, you're wrong, your thinking is twisted, it's so filled with untruths, blah, 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 and then makes the other feel very, very small or angry. And the anger is what's fueling this whole thing anyway. Anger is a secondary emotion, right? To some disappointment or loss or deep sadness.
Yeah, we need to de-escalate these conversations, just rediscover our common humanity. And I think we can rebuild our world in a fabulously wonderful way. I got to say, here's one of the things that makes me really hopeful, right? We've been talking about how things are going to hell in a handbasket in certain ways, but I'm really excited about this. When we discovered the body's immune system and learned how to strengthen it, public health just skyrocketed. We made human life so much healthier and happier, and we reduced suffering by an order of magnitude. And now we're learning how the mind's immune system works, and we're learning how to strengthen it against the kind of ideas that divide us against one another, that prevent us from problem solving together, that prevent us from having the conversations that give our lives meaning. I think we can look forward to a day where the science of mental immunity leads to a second revolution in human well-being that's comparable to the one created by vaccine technology and immunology.
Yeah, clearly I'm signed on. I agree. I think that it's, hook me up, sign me up. I'm there with you. We're out of time. And I wanted to just mention, to sort of give a plug going back to CIRCE and the Mental Immunity Project. And I would love for you to, well, first of all, for CIRCE, for cognitive immunology, you can go to cognitivimmunology.net. And then for mental immunity, it's mentalimmunity.org.
Mentalimmunityproject.org.
Mentalimmunityproject.org. On the websites, there are loads, heaps of resources, free guides to building mental immunity, a mental immunity challenge, a quick quiz. There are workshops that are happening on both websites, and lots of resources. And also, we invite our listeners to jump on over to the More Mental Fitness extended edition or bonus content, which is an extension of this conversation, over on Substack and Medium, because we're gonna keep going.
All right. Sounds great to me.
And to find Andy, do so at andynorman.com. You can find him on Twitter at Dr. Andy No, and on Facebook, Andy Norman Author. As always, huge thanks for spending part of your day with me and allowing me on part of this journey with you. It's been really amazing.
Thank you, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to work with you.
Thanks for joining us today on Harvesting Happiness. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Dr. Andy Norman, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day, and remember to be kind to one another. Want to take a deeper dive into sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content, More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness, available exclusively on Medium and Substack. Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime, anywhere from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes from wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by me, Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the awesome team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.